without merit or work on your part. It is also freely given to you, regardless of your works, without any of your merits. It is given of pure grace. Do you understand what Luther is saying? He is saying something that is important for the people in his day, and he is saying something that is important for the people in our day. Back then, the Roman Catholics wanted people to believe that they worked their way to heaven. They wanted to be able to stand before God and say, I am good. I am good enough that I am able to enter into your presence. But Luther, on the other hand, said that if you were to ask the teachers of his day how to become acceptable in God's sight, then they would say, indeed, we must pray and fast and attend church, abstain from sin, and so on. One will enter a monastery, and another some order. One will become a priest. Another will wear clothes made out of goat's hair. One will punish himself in a certain way, and another in another way. They are like Cain and do the works of Cain. They were before they did any of this, just as they are now. They are without justification. They merely have an external change, an alteration of works, clothing, condition, and habits. They are really monkeys, assuming the habits of saints, but remaining unholy. They don't think about faith. Rather, they run along with their good works towards heaven, torturing themselves. In every age and in every religion other than Christianity, people want to think that they are good enough for God to like them. In every age and in every religion, apart from Christianity, people are trying to work their way to heaven and blessedness. That is not merely something that was true during Luther's age. It is something that is true even today. People never really want to go through the narrow door of salvation because they can't take all of their good works with them through that narrow door. They want to be able to have pride in what they have done. They want to be able to look at their accomplishments and say, I am good.
That's right.
But the Bible teaches us something that is different. If you want to become acceptable by God, then you must turn away from any idea that you are good enough. Humble yourselves and turn towards Christ in order to be saved. Amen. Let Him do what you cannot do by yourself.
Amen.
And that is what Luther said is important for understanding Galatians 4:1-7. We've been talking a lot about the law lately. We've been talking a lot about the Ten Commandments. And Luther would say that if you want to really understand the law, then you first need to understand what these verses are saying, and you need to understand justification. If you understand justification, then you can definitely understand this. So let's look at it again. I mean that the heir, as long as he is a child, is no different from the slave, though he is the owner of everything. But he is under guardians and managers until the date set by his father. In the same way, we also, when we were children, were enslaved to the elementary principles of the world. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth His Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. And because you are sons, God has sent the Spirit of His Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, then an heir through God. This whole passage is about what non-Christians and Christians do with the things that God has commanded. And it is very relevant to our study about the Ten Commandments. And what Paul is asking us to do in this passage is to think about an ancient household. Imagine in your mind what things used to be like back then. Imagine a household in which there is a head of the household and the father has a little bit of money. He has enough money that he is able to keep some slaves. And so he gives these slaves certain things that they are to do each day. They are to, perhaps they're to wash, they're to clean, they're to do these different sorts of chores. And he also gives them certain rules concerning how they are to live within his household. He might say they're not to steal anything within the household. You can imagine that being a rule that every slave owner would have had. slaves obey the master? Why do the slaves obey the master? Luther says he renders his service in the spirit of a day laborer upon another's property. He renders his service in the spirit of a day laborer upon another's property. Why do people work? People work in order to earn food. People work because they have to do so. That would have been true for the slave as well. He had to earn his food. He had to work because the master told him to do so. But the critical thing that you need to understand is that the slave would not obey the commands of the master simply out of his love for the master. That would have seldom been the case. It is seldom that people work simply because they love the person that they work for. But now let's consider another group of people that were inside of this household. The owner of the household had some slaves, but he also had some children. Why do those children do the things their daddy tells them to do? The children would have had certain rules that they had to obey, just like the slaves did. They would have had certain chores that they had to do. They would have not been able to steal things. And so there are similarities between the slaves and the natural children. Both of them had to obey the master. But there is also something that is different about them. The natural child does not say to himself at night, I need to get all of my chores done or Daddy's going to fire me. Kids are never going to say something like that themselves, although we can imagine the slave saying that sort of thing. There is something that is secure about the relationship between a child and his father that is simply not secure about the relationship between a slave and his master. The master, at any time that he wanted to, could have sold that slave. If he had a slave that was too disobedient, if he had a slave that he couldn't handle, he could just get rid of them and give them to someone else. He could effectively fire them. The relationship between a master and his slave is based largely on performance. If that slave does the things that he should do, then he doesn't have to worry about the master giving him food. He doesn't have to worry too much about the master treating him reasonably well. But the child, on the other hand, has this relationship that is much deeper and stronger than a slave has to his master. The child knows that his daddy accepts him just as he is. The child knows that his dad loves him even when he does things that are wrong. So why does the child obey his daddy? It's not because he's afraid that his father is going to fire him or not feed him. He does it because he loves his dad.
Amen.
Because he wants to see the delight in his father's eyes when he does what his dad wants him to do. Sophia is still in an age where she loves to obey her dad. It's a blessed age. And she'll say things like this, I do it for you, Daddy. I'll bring it to you, Daddy. Because she loves to see the delight in my eyes when she does what I've asked her to do. She's not doing it because she's afraid she's going to lose her job. She's doing it because there is a happiness that comes up in her heart because she loves her daddy and she wants to please him. This illustration that we see in Galatians, given to us by Paul, helps us to understand why non-Christians try to do what is right. And it also helps us to understand why Christians try to do what is right. Non-Christians are like the slaves in this illustration. Non-Christians will often try to do good things.
That's right.
There are people who do not worship the one true God who build hospitals. Building a hospital is a good thing. But they don't do it with the pureness of heart that they need to have. Everyone in this entire world knows down deep that there are certain things that God requires of them. They know that there are certain rules that they have to follow. There are certain things that they should do. Romans 19:20 says, Romans 1:19